Dear participants, ladies and gentlemen, you may be interested to know that besides Malaysia, there are participants from Bulgaria, Iraq, Singapore, and Australia. Good morning and welcome to Minds Nobel Forum 2. This is the second event organized by Malaysian Invention and Design Society to promote excellence in scientific research. We are very encouraged by your support and we are indebted to academician Emeritus Professor Dr. Yong Hoi Sen, Senior Fellow Academy of Sciences Malaysia, to be the moderator for the forum, and we are grateful to our eminent speakers, Professor Dr. Ramesh Subramaniam, Faculty of Science, University of Malaya, and Associate Dr. Tan Kok Gan from the same university. Now, to support this organization, we'd like to thank Silver Lake Symmetry and Technology Research Center Berhad for its generous financial support. Now, I have great pleasure in inviting academician Emeritus Professor Dr. Yong Hoi Sen to moderate Nobel Forum 2. I wish every participant an inspiring and productive session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tan Sri, for inviting me to be the moderator. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Nobel Forum 2. This forum will focus on the Nobel Prize in Chemistry 2019 for the development of lithium-ion batteries and the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine 2020 for the discovery of the hepatitis C virus, in short, HCV. We are fortunate to have two eminent speakers to enlighten us at this forum. Both of them, incidentally or coincidentally, are from University of Malaya. And both of them are among the world's top 2% scientists for their citation impact as listed by researchers at Stanford University 2020. The speakers are Professor Dr. Ramesh Subramaniam, who will speak on supercapacitor, bridging the gap between batteries and supercapacitors. And Professor Dr. Tan Kok Gan will speak on not as easy as ABC, the discovery and global impact of hepatitis C virus. The first speaker will be Professor Ramesh T. Subramaniam. He is, among many others, Fellow of the Academy of Sciences Malaysia, Royal Society of Chemistry UK, Institute Kimia Malaysia, International Association of Advanced Materials, as well as Institute of Materials Malaysia. His expertise, among many others, includes electrochemistry, polymer electrolytes for rechargeable batteries, solar cells, fuel cells, and others. His ISI matrix is as follows: has an index, H index of 43, and a total number of WOS or Web of Science publications 231, and total citations of 6,180. For those who are interested on his expertise and his work, you can visit his website at umexpert.um.edu.my. I have now the pleasure to introduce Dr. Ramesh T. Subramaniam to present his talk. Professor Ramesh, please.
Yes, can start. Can I see?
Thank you, Prof. Yong, for your kind introduction. I also take this opportunity to thank Minds and Tan Sri and his team for the opportunity given for me to present what we are doing in our lab and also in our research. So today I'm going to talk on supercapacitor, bridging the gap between batteries and supercapacitors. So I'm Ramesh T. Subramaniam from University Malaya, and you can get my email and also my biography from the EM expert. You can always contact me if you have any what you call for research collaboration and so on. Okay, from the title itself, you can see it is a supercapacitor. So it's a combination of a supercapacitor and battery. So you can expect that I'm going to talk something about the hybrid electrochemical devices for today's presentation. Okay, some brief introduction on the topic. Three drivers that promote the investment in energy storage, as we know, are increase in electricity bill, decarbonization, and growing dependence on fossil fuel. So the electrochemical energy storage diagram clearly shows that electrochemical devices like batteries and fuel cells generally shows high energy density but low power density, whereas supercapacitors shows high power density and low energy density. And we can find there is a huge gap between supercapacitors and batteries. To bridge this gap, we are proposing a new type of electrochemical device known as supercapacitor. Okay, we also note that the projected carbon dioxide emission for four main sectors in Malaysia are electricity generation, industrial, transport, and residential. We are focusing on the transport industry in our research. Among the transport industry, we can see the road consumers contributing the highest percentage for the carbon dioxide emissions. So there is a big question always will come out. How can we contribute to reduce the carbon dioxide emission? As we know, most of the electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles are powered by lithium-ion battery technology. And current EVs and also the hybrid devices take hours to fully charge their batteries. So this is one of the main drawbacks. So to overcome these issues, we are proposing a supercapacitor which can combine the high energy storage capability of batteries with the high power delivery capability of supercapacitors. Okay, before we go in more detail, let me give you like a brief difference between supercapacitor and battery. Supercapacitors can store energy through electrostatic reactions using the non-Faraday mechanism, whereas batteries, they can store energy through Faraday reactions. So if you look at the diagram of the supercapacitor, we can clearly see it is asymmetrical devices where one side will be the battery type electrode which undergo Faraday reactions, and the other side will be the capacitive electrode which undergoes the non-Faraday reactions. So these two different reactions will happen simultaneously in supercapacitor. Okay, this new prototype supercapacitor works based on the combination of different charge storage mechanism offered by battery type and capacitive electrodes, which is an asymmetrical device. And we are also proposing the binder-free electrodes. When we talk about the binder-free electrodes, this can increase the rate capability and also can improve the mechanical property of the electrode. When we separate the electrodes, there need to be some medium in between them. So the best separator will be the electrolyte, and we are also proposing like a biopolymer gel electrolyte since they are safer and also no fear of electrolyte leakage. And we can do the formulation and fabrication of these different type of electrode and electrolyte by cheap and abundant materials. The beauty of this supercapacitor that we are proposing here is which can replace the batteries and also the supercapacitor are they can be constructed into two different designs, either rigid or flexible, based on what is our need. And supercapacitor also can be made into power bank configuration, in terms of the series, parallel, or combination of both series strings in parallel. Okay, before I go in more details, let me explain to the audience what is the problems that we are facing. Whenever we talk about the electrochemical devices, the three main components are electrolyte, electrode, and the device itself. And we talk about electrolyte. So most of the electrolyte that currently in use are using liquid electrolytes. When we say liquid electrolytes, they are harmful, prone to leaking, and also the poor long-term stability. So solid polymer electrolytes actually can replace the liquid electrolytes. But the problem will be the low ionic conductivity. And another option is synthetic polymer, but synthetic polymers are non-biodegradable and harmful. So all these are the problems that we face by using electrolyte. When we talk about electrode, conventionally, electrodes are made with a binder. The binder which is commonly used in all the commercial electrodes are polyvinylidene fluoride. It's a kind of a polymer. As we know, polymers always can decrease the conductivity of a system. And by using these binders, it not only increases the resistivity, at the same time, it can also add the dead weight of the electrode. When we talk about the device, batteries generally take longer time to be fully charged, whereas supercapacitors are unable to store high amount of energy. Okay, let me talk about some of the policies. When we talk about the policies, the National Automotive Policies 2020 are focusing more on the energy efficient vehicles. So one of the main objectives of this policy is to reduce carbon emission in line with ASEAN fuel economy roadmap of 5.3 liters gasoline equivalent per 100 kilometer by 2025. And we can observe here the development of advanced electrode and electrolytes are the most important in the list of technology development under NAP 2020. So we are working on to producing new type of formulation for the electrode and electrolyte. On top of that, the other things they are also focusing in this NAP is next generation battery technology. So what is after battery? So that is where we are proposing the supercapacitor. So you can see one of the main aim of our work is to produce novel type of electrode and electrolyte to fabricate supercapacitor. Okay, this one I just came across an article which published in January this year. Maybe I thought of sharing with this new technology with you all. And an Israeli company, they found that an electric car battery that can be fully charged in 5 minutes. So the major obstacle in buying electric vehicles or even for hybrid vehicle is a thought of having to wait for your battery to be charged. So Stordart is a company that invented a battery that can be fully charged in 5 minutes. So in their work, they propose silicon dominant anode materials to be used in their electric vehicles. So to study the extreme fast charging, they tried with the electric scooter, and 6 months later ago, they also tried with the commercial drone. So their technology and also Tesla, Innovate, and Sila nanotechnologies are all working on the silicon electrodes. Others are also looking at different compounds such as ichion, which uses niobium oxide nanoparticles. So we can see people are focusing on the electrode and electrolyte materials. So let me go and explain to you all about the first component, which is the polymer electrolyte. Okay, generally we know polymers are insulators. So the reason we are using polymer in electrochemical devices as electrolyte because they are light in weight. So the main task is how to make the polymer which are insulator to become as a conductor. Polymer electrolytes are of technological interest due to their possible application as a solid electrolyte in various electrochemical devices. They are not only behave as an electrolyte, they also can work as a very good separator which separate the anode and cathode in the devices. So all these are possible application by using polymer electrolytes. So our main focus, we work on the batteries, supercapacitor, and solar cell, and recently we are working on the supercapacitors. Okay, why we use polymer electrolyte over liquid electrolytes? As I mentioned earlier, liquid electrolytes can make the corrosion at the electrodes, and they also present a potential explosion at high temperature and voltage. And because of the liquid electrolyte, leakage is possible, and they also can swell the device. So the option will be the polymer electrolytes, which can give us a better thermal stability and also high flexibility. But the challenge always will be the lower ionic conductivity in the polymer, because generally polymers are insulator. So what are the strategies to overcome these difficulties is by using cross-linking, blending, copolymerization, and also incorporation of a suitable additives. Okay, the first requirement for the polymer electrolytes will be the polymers. Okay, we have experience working with the different type of polymers, either natural or synthetic, like a starch. When we talk about the starch, we work with the cornstarch and also rice starch, cellulose, chitosan. All these can be used as a host polymer. And we also work with the polyvinyl alcohol, polylactic acid, and so on. We have also experienced working with some non-biodegradable polymers like a polyvinyl chloride, polyvinyl fluoride, polymethyl methacrylate, and so on. Just to share with you all, polyethylene oxide is the first polymer which tried as a polymer electrolyte. In my what I call like PhD work, I work on the polyvinyl chloride. And the second requirement is a salt. Salt is the one which will determine the application of the polymer electrolytes. Okay, if you look at the lithium salt, for example, if you use appropriate lithium salt, that means we are showing that this can be used for the lithium ion-based supercapacitor. If you are using sodium salt, then for the sodium ion-based supercapacitor, and same for the magnesium. But just say we wanted to use this polymer electrolyte for polymer electrolyte membrane fuel cell. As we know, for fuel cells, the byproduct is water, so the presence of hydrogen ion is crucial. So to produce polymer electrolyte membrane fuel cell, then we have to use the ammonium salt as a ionic charge carriers. And just say our focus is to be produce dye-sensitized solar cell. So for dye-sensitized solar cells, generally iodine will be used as a dye. So if you're using iodine as a dye, then we need to incorporate the iodide ion. So in this case, for example, we can use lithium iodide. So by using lithium iodide, so this iodine will react with the iodide and they will produce the triiodide ion, which will make the conductions even better. So again, the selection of salt depends on the application that we're going to use in the studies. Okay, these are just, I want to share with you all the evaluation of polymer electrolytes. The first generation polymer electrolytes are generally salt-based polymer electrolytes. And the researchers found that even though the salt can change the polymer from insulator to become as a conductor, but the conductivity values are not sufficient enough to be used for electrochemical devices. So that's where they come to the second generation, where they're using plasticizers to enhance the ionic conductivity of the polymer electrolytes. But again, the problem will be by using plasticizers they can decrease the mechanical properties. So handling become an issue. So that's where come the third generation polymer electrolytes. Third generation polymer electrolytes is by using nanomaterials. These nanomaterials not only increase ionic conductivity, they can also increase the mechanical stability of the electrolytes. In progressive years, we are using like a irradiation, ion liquid, and other methods too. Okay, here I'm just thought of sharing with you all one of the method and the material that we have patented. So this is more for the copolymer membrane, where this copolymer membrane that we have a patent. So they are mechanically elastic, where this membrane are highly stretchable, where they can go up to more than 200%, and they also shows high adhesive properties, where they can stick on the Teflon coated petri dishes very well. And they also shows high safety properties, where they can give you as the thermal shutdown properties. Okay, here I'm also sharing with you all what are the methods that we can use to improve the conductivity, like a polymer blending, plasticizers, fillers, and ionic liquid. Okay, the first one will be the plasticizers. So plasticizers are generally give us high dielectric constant. So once they have the high dielectric constant, this will be a good advantage to increase the conductivity of the electrolyte system. On top of that, they also shows a low viscosity and superior miscibility with the polymer to produce gel polymer electrolytes. So here we can see the role of plasticizers. The structurally rigid polymer, by incorporation of plasticizers, they can become like a really flexible chain where the space enlargement within the polymeric chain can occur. The plasticization mechanism can be explained by many theories. For example, lubricity theory, gel theory, free volume theory, or mechanistic theory. So here I may share with you all some of the results that we obtained. We can see from here, plasticizers generally can increase the ionic conductivity of the polymers attributed due to the high dielectric constant of the plasticizers itself. But we can also see at high concentration of the plasticizers, agglomeration can be observed and the conductivity can decrease. So the formulation of the right weight ratio of the plasticizers are crucial in any studies. And ethylene carbonate and propylene carbonate are widely used plasticizers. So this is due to their dielectric properties, and the dielectric properties are also shown in the graphs above. Okay, next, plasticization also can influence the viscosity of the polymer electrolyte. The decrease in viscosity will contribute to increase in mobile ions transportation. Okay, next, we also can see how plasticizers can influence the flexibility and the mechanical properties of the polymeric chain. So results here shows that the Young modulus value and also stress at peak values are decreases with the incorporation of the plasticizers. So this shows that plasticizers can decrease the mechanical properties of the polymer electrolyte. Okay, now I'm going to share with you all how the nanomaterials work on polymers. So from this result, we can see the incorporation of the nanoparticles can increase the ionic conductivity, and also we can observe with the increase in temperature, the conductivity increases. This temperature dependent ionic conductivity are crucial in studying the mechanism of the electrochemical devices. And we also can observe here the nanoparticles can decrease the gas transition temperature of the system, which shows that the flexibility of the polymer membrane are improved by adding or incorporating nanoparticles. And this result shows that incorporation of nanoparticles can reduce the crystallinity, and we can observe the relative crystallinity and also the heat of fusion of the nanoparticle based materials are higher. And generally, amorphous natures are preferred for the high ionic conductions. And on top of that, nanoparticles can retain the high ionic conductivity for prolonged times. So this is what we call as the aging effect of the nanoparticles in polymer electrolytes. Okay, next we're going to look some of the properties of the ionic liquids. When we use ionic liquid as a conductivity enhancer in the polymer electrolytes, we can avoid using environmentally non-friendly solvents like organic solvents. And this ionic liquid also can give us excellent thermal stability and high ion content. So these results shows that the incorporation of ionic liquid can increases the ionic conductivity of the polymer membranes. This result shows the usage of the 1-butyl 3-methyl-imidazolium bromide. In our lab, we also managed to synthesize few iodide-based ionic liquid, such as 1-butyl 3-methyl-imidazolium iodide and 1-methyl 3-propyl imidazolium iodide. So this iron liquid shows excellent properties when we use in the electrochemical devices. So normally we can see for iron liquid, the bulky cation can create more segmental pathways which destroy the dense packing and cross-linking density of the polymer. So they can create more amorphous and increase the ion diffusion. Like I mentioned earlier, amorphous nature is preferred for the better conductions. And also the addition of iron liquid with a bulky cation can produce high concentration of iodide ions and increases the performance of devices. So we also work with a deep ethylic solvent where the combination of urea and choline chloride used as a conductivity enhancer in the electrolyte. Let us focus on some electrode materials. When we talk about the electrode materials, porosity, conductivity, the size, doping, and composite nature are preferred. Like I mentioned earlier, conventionally people go for the electrode with a binder, where polymers will be used as a binder. So now we are focusing on the electrode without binder. So the absence of polymeric binder can increase the conductivity of electrode. So we use metal phosphate, which has 3D framework with a low thermal expansion as a core material. And we are also using polyaniline as the electrode material because polyaniline got the unique redox properties whereby with appropriate doping, they can change from insulator to become as a conductor. Okay, these are material formulations. So the nickel phosphate can be changed to become as a binary nanocomposite by incorporating silver complex with positively charged surface. And the incorporation of polyaniline also can produce the ternary nanocomposite of polyaniline, nickel phosphate, and silver phosphate. And the method that we are using here is a sonochemical method. And this sonochemical method is a simple and straightforward method. And we consider here the acoustic cavitations where the bubble is produced and the collapse of bubble will give us a synthesized nanoparticle with the unique properties like stable nanoparticles, high yield, and able to vary the size of the nanoparticle below 100 nanometer. And then the BET surface areas also shows that the sonicated nanoparticles will have a higher surface area. So this is the evidence that it will display excellent dispersion and contact in the polymer matrix. The FESM SEM images shows that sonochemical process produce finer cobalt oxide nanoparticles that display relatively high dispersibilities within the gel polymer electrolytes. And the other materials that we can use to produce the nanoparticles to be used in electrode materials are microwave assisted thermal synthesis. The beauty of this one, not only the high productivity and efficiency, also the shorter reaction time. Okay, recently we are also working with the atmospheric plasma method to produce nanomaterials for electrode component. Okay, for 3 electrode system which is used for the electrode fabrication, and for this the fabricated electrode will be used as a working electrode. When we talk about the supercapacitor, the performance normally will be analyzed using the 2 electrode system where the ternary nanocomposite will be used as a battery type electrode and the activated carbon will be used as a capacitive electrodes. And the electrolyte will separate these 2 systems. And some of the results to shows that the ternary nanocomposite has a very good complexation which can be observed from the XRD and also the FTIR. This is shown by the what I call like a creation of the new peak, the shift in the peak, and also the intensity of the peaks. And then HRTM results shows that silver phosphate nanoparticles decorated on the surface of nickel phosphate and a very good inclusion of the nickel phosphate and silver phosphate particles into the polyaniline. And then here the result shows that the amorphous structure of nickel phosphate has abundance properties and the presence of silver nanoparticles, silver phosphate nanoparticles supply the additional surface area to the unutilized surface area of the nickel phosphate. Whereas the the polyaniline, will act as a connective layer which unifies the involvement of Pani and nickel phosphate, silver phosphate. And we can see some of the results of the Super Kappa 3, where the rate capability and also the cyclic stability of the system in the nickel phosphate and silver phosphate is improved. And the ternary nanocomposite shows the highest rate capability and cycle stability, where the highest energy density with the maximum value of 38.9 watt-hour per kilogram at 400 watt per kilogram is observed. Okay, next, I'm also wanted to share some of our work with the hydrogel electrolytes. Generally, people know hydrogels are used in biological applications like drug delivery, tissue engineering, and wound dressings. But what we are trying here is to use, I can also proudly say, we are one of the pioneer group using hydrogel as a host polymer for polymer electrolytes to be used in the electrochemical devices. And this hydrogel can be prepared either as a physical hydrogel or chemical hydrogels. So here are some of the polymers that can behave as a hydrogel. Like, for example, if you take a PVA, the physical cross-linking can be done by freeze thawing or hydrogen bonding, whereas chemical cross-linking can be done by using appropriate cross-linkers. And even like a chitosan cellulose also can be made as a hydrogels. Hydrogel is selected because they are highly flexible, stretchable, self-healable, and all these properties can be proposed. And hydrogel also got high stretchable properties, and we also can twist them, we can bend them, and also knotting can be done with the hydrogels. And here we can see how sticky the hydrogel is. So these adhesive properties are very good, where they can even behave more like a double-sided tape, where they can stick very well with the anode and cathode material, which can improve the performance of the devices. So another beauty of the hydrogel electrolyte is using what they call hydrogel is due to their self-healable properties. Just say we take the pristine and we cut them into two pieces. If we join them again, then they can grow together due to the cross-linking, and they can show the performance they showed before they are broken. So this is what we call as the self-healability properties of the hydrogel. Okay, here are some of the results that we use acrylamide as a host material by using ammonium persulfate as an initiator and clay as a cross-linking agent to prepare the hydrogel electrolytes. Obviously, we need to apply the lithium salt as a source of ionic carriers. So here, the FACM images shows the high porosity of the hydrogel electrolyte. Initially itself, I mentioned that porosity is one of the important parameters need to have. Then EDX analysis confirmed the presence of the acrylamide. And results shows that polyacrylamide hydrogel added with the PDOT and PSS show higher ionic conductivity and specific capacitance due to the conducting nature of the PDOT and PSSs. So they are very good conducting polymers. And recently, we have also introduced a new type of hydrogel, which we call as all-in-one configurations. So we can see here, the hydrogel is prepared in an electrolyte system, and then we coat the electrode on top of that by using the Pani and polypyrrole. So in other words, the electrode will sit on top of the electrolytes. So the whole system, which is the electrolyte and electrode, all made in all-in-one configuration, which we call as the hydrogel configurations. Okay, here I just want to share with some of the flexible things. So you can see the as-prepared hydrogels were so flexible that they were capable of withstanding different deformation. We try to fold them. We even can make them as a cylindrical shape, and they showed excellent properties. So in research, the most important thing is, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So we are always welcome for any collaborations, and people who are listening to talk and even know about our work, we are always welcome you all to join our group to work together to make our research even better. So before I end my presentation, all this may not have been possible if not for my students. So special thank you to all my students from undergraduate to postgraduates and postdocs. And then again, I take this opportunity to thank Prof. Yong and also Prof. Lamsai Kit, who is one of my mentor, and Prof. Karim, who is my main teacher, Prof. Abdul Karim Aruf, who is retired. And also I would like to thank University Malaya, my alma mater, and also the place where I'm working, to all my teachers from Standard 1 until now, and all my collaborators and researchers and friends, and not forgetting the taxpayers who always support our research. And a big thank you to Tan Sri Professor Emeritus Dr. Augustine Wong to give me the opportunities to share and to give the presentation in this nice venue. Thank you again, everyone.
Thank you, Professor Ramesh, for your superb presentation. We'll now move on to the next speaker, Professor Dr. Chan Kok Kan. He is a fellow, among others, Academy of Sciences Malaysia and the Royal Society of Biology UK. His expertise includes genome biology, omics technology, last but not least, bacterial quorum sensing and quorum quenching. The ISI metrics includes H-index of 41, Web of Science publications of 368, and a total citation of 6,184. For those who are interested in his expertise and achievements, please visit his website, um.edu.my, and you'll get all the information there. Now, please welcome Professor Dr. Chan Kok Kan to give us his presentation. Dr. Chan, please take the floor.
Thank you, Professor Emeritus Young, for the kind introduction. And first of all, before I start my presentations, I thank the organizer, MINDS, and also Tan Sri Professor Emeritus Young, Augustine Wong, for inviting me to give a talk on this Nobel Forum too, which I feel very honored to. Okay, and today I will share with you the topic entitled not as easy as ABC, the discovery and global impact of hepatitis C virus. So this will be the what we call the topic for the day, and I put it here, the title, so that it looks much simpler than the discovery itself, as the children's song ABCDE looks like. Okay, but this is not the children's song that we are looking for. So you have the different types of hepatitis viruses that actually cause inflammations to the liver of the human being, and they are quite diverse in terms of the range of this virus. Okay, so you have the what we call hepatitis A, which is actually non-blood-borne viruses that actually cause the inflammations in the just a moment, sorry. Okay, thanks. Now, sorry for the interruptions. Now, the hepatitis A, B, D, E, which is shown in this table, which I will not go through in details, but just to draw your attentions to that, B and D normally comes together so that they will cause the core infections, and these are actually vertical transmissions through the mother to child during birth and delivery, and they are blood-borne. Okay. So the hepatitis A, on the other hand, is actually transmitted through the fecal-oral route, and this is by close person-to-person contact, and they are normally found in the area which has poor sanitizations and also contaminated food and water. And then hepatitis E, which is also transmitted same as the hepatitis A viruses, which is through the fecal-oral route, and also by poor sanitations and ingestions of contaminated food and water. Okay, vertical transmission is also possible. So in that case, so this will be the various common types of hepatitis viruses that can be found. They all have common symptoms, which is they are causing the infections to the liver. But today, instead of looking at the A, B, C, D, E, we are focusing on the C, which is the discovery of hepatitis C virus that awarded the Nobel Prize in year 2020, last year, which is jointly awarded and shared by Harvey Alter, and then Michael Houghton and Charles Rice for their discovery in this very important virus, which I hope I will be able to share with you at the end of the lectures. Okay, so this will be the three gentlemen who has contributed very significantly on the discovery, among other researchers who is also working on the same field. So from left to right, Harvey Alter, and then this is Charles Rice and Michael Houghton that actually contributed to the discovery of this work. Now, just to refresh your mind on the complex table which I presented a few slides ago. So the major viruses that actually contributed to the hepatitis in human being will be the hepatitis A, B, and C. Among these, the B and C will be blood-borne, okay? And they are causing the liver inflammations, cirrhosis, and also eventually hepatocellular carcinoma, which is the liver cancer in this case. And this is blood-borne, and that will be what we need to focus in the next few slides, okay? So living in the present in 2021, so we now know that hepatitis C actually is a global public health burden that causes about 71 million infections worldwide, and this is blood-borne, as I mentioned earlier. So, but nowadays, this is primarily transmitted through the sharing of needles among the drug users in the modern society, okay? So, but I will show you in the next slides, things are quite different in the past, okay? And about 80% of these infected people, they are asymptomatic and shows no illness. But eventually, they will either cause scarring of the liver, which we call it cirrhosis in this case, and then could ultimately lead to the liver cancer that causes 400,000 deaths per year globally. So that is present. Now, what happened way back in the 1940s? If we travel in time, okay, people then realized that there are two main types of infectious hepatitis that happens in the human being, okay? Then they know that the first type is hepatitis A, one of the earliest viruses, hepatitis viruses that has been discovered here, okay? And they know that it is transmitted through the polluted water and food and transmitted by the injections of this, okay? Although that causes very little or no long-term effects. But the more important one is the second type that is transmitted by blood and bodily fluids, okay? So this is the one that causes the serious threats to lead to the chronic conditions of the cirrhosis and the liver cancer, okay? Again, as time goes on, not much has been done or discovered in the 40s, but then, and in the 1960s, okay, after much work has been done, Harvey Alter, one of the laureates in 1963, worked together with Bomberg, and then they discovered in the blood, in the routine screening of the blood, and then they found that there is something they call Australian antigen, which is they thought it is present in the blood of the human being, but then it is later found it is actually a new virus, which is the Hep B, hepatitis B virus. And because of this discovery, Bloomberg worked on it, and then he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Medicine or Physiology in the 1976. Okay, so and we now know that the hepatitis B are widespread and they are blood-borne and they are leading cause of the liver cancer. So way back in the 1960s, we thought, okay, that's it, we are fine. Okay, now we know that these viruses, hepatitis B causes the blood-borne hepatitis. So, but then Alter still observed very carefully. He noticed that the hepatitis B only give rise to about 30% of the hepatitis from the blood transfusions. There is still a lot of unanswered hepatitis that is not caused by this virus. And then hepatitis A virus discovered much earlier in the 1975. So they do not show any blood transfusion associated hepatitis. So it is actually Alter work that shows that the blood from the hepatitis patients could transmit disease to the chimpanzees. So he actually used this as an animal model. Okay. Now, and then later on, so this becomes a big concern where because B has been discovered and they screen the blood with the hepatitis B, but still there is a lot of, we call it mysterious infections of the hepatitis through the blood transfusion. So it becomes a big concern when people are receiving blood transfusions for medical reasons. They still have chronic hepatitis due to unknown infectious agents. So later on, which author actually called this non-A, non-B hepatitis, he knew this mysterious illness is likely to be caused by a virus, okay? But it is neither A nor B. So what could that be in the 1960s, okay? Now, another laureate, Houghton, actually started to work on this, and he actually created the DNA library obtained from the blood of the infected animal model, chimpanzee, the only animal model at that time, which is infected by this non-A, non-B. We now know that it's hepatitis C. So he started to screen this with the patients that contains the sera or the antibodies. One of the clone actually responded to this massive millions DNA library, and then he tried many ways, approximately 30 according to his interview. So then he found a tiny clone that actually contained the nucleotides, about 150 nucleotides that actually responded to the patient's antibodies. So this is one out of the hundreds of millions of clones that he screened according to his interview. Okay. So, and I quote that he said that we didn't have the tools available then that we have to do now. So again, for all the audience, I need to remind you, we are talking about the 1960 discoveries, okay? At that same time, okay, author from NIH in United States also noticed that the hepatitis B virus test actually reduced the number of cases of the blood transfusion related hepatitis, but the cases remain high in spite of the fact that the screening methods are actually available for hepatitis B virus, and A does not cause these unexplained cases. So they need to further to do this work, and then eventually in the 1990s, time moved very fast. So the work continued from the 60s to the 90s, and Houghton's group actually published a paper and officially named this so-called mysterious virus as a hepatitis C virus, and they now know that this is an RNA virus from the Flaviviridae family. At the same time, the third laureate actually works on this, which is Charles Rice, and he constructed a cDNA library because this is a RNA viruses. So one of the RNA transcript, he worked out, and then actually it is infectious to the chimpanzee's model, and then give the final missing pieces discovered, which proved that the hepatitis C virus is the one that causes this so-called mysterious hepatitis in the blood transfusions. So that actually solved the complete puzzles of the hepatitis C discovery. So the results also advanced the study using what we call a rat model, a mouse model, instead of a very bulky chimpanzee models. And that will be a breakthrough for those who work with the animal models. Okay. Now, subsequently, the blood tests for the hepatitis C are in place, and that actually almost eliminated the post-transfusion hepatitis globally. Okay. So their discovery, the joint discovery of all these laureates also leads to the development of the anti-drugs against the hepatitis C virus. So for the first time in the mankind history, so this disease can be cured, therefore giving hopes of eradicating the hepatitis C virus globally. Okay, but there is still no hope. The antiviral drugs are there, but there is still no hope for the vaccine. So light in the tunnel, but not so bright. Okay, now what's wrong? So this hepatitis C virus, let's look at some. I'm not going through in detail about the virology of this virus, but it will be good to just go through it. So this is the electron micrograph, a small virus, 55 to 65 nanometer in size. And the genome of this hepatitis C virus is positive strand, single-stranded RNA virus. And this is very short genome, as like all other viruses, is about 10 kilobases long, okay? And worldwide, there are still a million new cases being infected, reported by the WHO, okay? So this is the genome or the genomic makeup of this virus, a typical hepatitis C virus, which is, as you say, as you can see, this is an envelope virus, which contains a single-stranded positive strand RNA viruses. Okay, they store their genomic information in the form of RNA. And because of this genomic discovery by one of the laureates, so we now know that the multiple genotypes and subtypes of the hepatitis C are actually identified. So for those of you who are not very familiar with the genotypes, so this actually shows that the genotypes or the genetic makeup of these viruses can vary from one to another by up to 30 to 35%. If you hit this percentage, we call it different genotypes. And subtypes can further be break down into quasi-species, which is based on the genetic diversity. For those of you who are not following, in short, this simply means that the genetic makeup of this hepatitis C virus is actually very versatile. They do not follow the blueprint faithfully. So in terms of their genomic, what we call stability, they are very promiscuous, okay? So, and this difference of HCV or hepatitis C virus genotypes can be used to pinpoint the geographical distributions and also as an epidemiology marker to trace the infections. Okay, so this will be the what we call overview of the genotypes that are present based on the work that has been done in the past half a century. And this is the one, the genotype subtype 1 is the one that is actually aggressive, which has been found globally. And that will be the map that is being shown, the distributions of the different genotypes, but all from the same hepatitis C virus. Okay, as you can see, there are still others hepatitis, which is non-typical genotypes in this case. So, and they are distributed worldwide. Now, so I would like to share with you something about this. This is a classical basic research, but then as in all other Nobel discovery, so they have a big, what we call impact to the world. So they were actually formally reported in the 1989. So the complex life cycle of HCV is finally reported. That took about 20 years to discover. And they're highly divergent. We know they have different phenotypes, and that actually has a consequences on the design of vaccines and the antiviral drugs. Okay, so the hepatitis C virus is also a new what we call virology model, which they actually shows that the microRNA are actually could be responsible for its replications. And this is quite new for those who work in the virology. They should be able to testify this. So this is a classical translational success based on what we call basic research that allows the empirical treatments by interferon, and also diagnostics tools are being developed. And we also now confirm that not only this, they also lead to the cancer formations in the host, which is the human being. So, and this is about the Nobel discovery in the 2020 that has been awarded. Now, what if there is no such discovery by this Nobel laureate who is doing fundamental research for the world? Then we will not be able to know that the transmission is actually possible. That is hepatitis C virus other than the B virus is also a blood-borne, okay? And we now know that they can be transmitted classically. Now we know that it is the sharp objects, reuse of what we call unsterilized medical equipments, which involve invasive procedures, transfusions of unscreened blood and blood products, unsafe sexual practices, for example, men with sex with men, okay? So this will actually cause this. Now, without their basic research work, we will also not be able to decipher the causing agents based on the symptoms, as most of the viruses symptoms like this case, which is very common, and they include fever, fatigue, loss of appetite, nausea, and that will not pinpoint to any specific disease, perhaps except dark urine, gray color feces, but these are also very common. Perhaps jaundice could be indicating that your liver may be inflamed. And then without their basic work, so diagnosis is also not possible. Even diagnosis is possible. Remember that 80% of the patients are actually asymptomatic. So that left very few patients diagnosed, okay? And without their work, okay, we will not be able to design the two steps diagnosis, which is based on serology and nucleic acid test. This is actually detecting the anti-hepatitis C virus antibodies. And the second step, which is nucleic acid, that actually allows us to do the RT-PCR to detect this based as a diagnosis. Okay. More importantly, without the basic research of these laureates, so there will be no treatment because you will not be able to know the causing agents, which is the step one for all infectious disease. Okay. Now, with that in place, then WHO will be able to give the guidelines in the 2018 year, and they recommended the therapy with the pan-genotypic direct-acting viral drugs. Remember, they have a lot of genotypes. So these are the drugs that actually work against pangenome hepatitis C virus. And that will take 12 to 24 weeks of treatments, depending on whether the patients have or have no cirrhosis developed. Okay, so this, even then, the treatments are actually very limited because in year 2017, where the world has been, populations of 71 million has been infected with this virus. So merely up to 20% of 13.1 million actually knew their diagnosis. And bear in mind that this does not show any symptoms. And of these diagnosed, and only a handful of about 5 million has been treated with the DAA drugs that the WHO has been recommended. Okay, still there is still much more work that needs to be done on this problem. Okay, now with the Nobel laureates discovery, we also be able to come up with the prevention, which is always the best tactic to prevent any infectious disease. So the WHO actually recommended that a safe and appropriate use of healthcare injections, especially involving what we call a sharp objects, safe and handling and safe disposal of the sharps and waste from the medical settings. So what we call provisions of comprehensive harm reductions to people who inject drugs. So this need to be properly educated. And then testing of donated blood for HPV and HCV together with the HIV and syphilis. So this has become the standard hematology practice in the clinical settings as well. And the training of a health personnel to be aware of this hepatitis C virus, and also to create public awareness for the unsafe practice of the sexual intercourse. Okay. Now, then secondary preventions, WHO also recommended that this is a broader strategy. So educations and counseling on the options for care and treatment if you are infected. And of course, the best is still immunize with the hepatitis A and B vaccines to prevent co-infections from the other hepatitis viruses and to protect the liver. But bear in mind, hepatitis C still have no effective vaccines to be developed yet. Okay. Now, they have early appropriate medical management, including the antiviral drugs therapy, which is in place. Okay. And also regular monitoring for those who are actually infected for early diagnosis of chronic liver disease and to intervene as early as possible. So in a nutshell, this is what the three Nobel laureates has already discovered. So again, this is just a fresh refreshment for you. And this is in the 1970s. Harvey Alter studied the transmissions of hepatitis, and he screened massive amounts of blood from the blood bank for blood transfusions. And then he shows that there is a new blood-borne viral pathogens that could actually transmit the disease to chimpanzees. Now, and then subsequently, at the same time, Michael Houghton and colleagues worked in Chiron Corporations in the United States, identified a virus using the genetic material from the chimpanzee animal models and proved that the new RNA virus belonged to the Flaviviridae, and they officially named it as hepatitis C virus. Rise at the Washington universities at that time using the what we call not conventional methods, and actually he characterized a portion of the hepatitis C genome that again injected directly into the liver of the chimpanzee. So that actually proved that the modus operandi of the viral replication is actually the confirmed method, and then this is actually the one that causes the liver diseases as well. So I try to recap this from the quotations given by the laureate himself. So the discovery of the HCV placed the world on the path to eliminations. So within the few years after their discovery, so diagnostic tests are available that can be done as a standard operating procedure for the donated blood before blood transfusion takes place, thereby reducing the risk of this hepatitis C virus from 1 in every 14 units to be 1 in every 1 million. So that is a significant improvement in the blood safety and injections control. Okay, so that actually gives rise to a massive contributions to the mankind public health. Okay, so this is something that I would like to share with you, especially for those who are actually young researchers, if you're any of the audience here. So the lesson learned or as lesson not learned, okay? So Adler from the Chiron researchers took 6 years just to clone a small fragment of hepatitis C genome. And we are talking about 150 nucleotides. Even when you work with Sanger sequencing, you can actually achieve much more than this. But then back in the 1960s to 1980s, where the technologies are not available, so 6 years just to clone a small fragment. So this is the lesson learned, and I would like to share with you how many of us actually today who work in molecular biology will work on such a small fragment. You can't even publish in non-index journals for this, okay? And again, I quote from Alter. So nowadays, if you don't have immediate endpoint, it is hard to get funding. How true? He said, it is much more difficult for people now, especially the young people, to pursue research. And I think the dynamic has to change a little bit. So for those of you who are not so young, and you have made it and you are now the policy maker, and I really urge you to reconsider the dilemma of the researchers that we are facing. Certain research just takes a little more time and more effort to get the positive results that you are hoping to get. And again, back in the 1960s to the 1980s, the tools available are very limited. So, and Alter recall that there is no proper tools available. NGS is definitely not available at the time. Now, thanks to the coronavirus infections, everyone knows about PCR, which is not very common before the 1980s. Okay, so and for those of you who are working on the virology, if you are working with the animal model, would you ever choose a chimpanzee model, which at that time the only animal that is susceptible to the so-called Hep A and non-A and non-B mysterious agents? If you remember my presentations, the only animal that is susceptible is chimpanzee. Would you work with this animal for your, let's say, MSc or PhD projects? So times, it takes a long years just to clone a small fragment, let alone all other discovery. And you are working with something unknown. If you were to ask your supervisor, so what is that we are working on? Don't know. That will be the answer. I do not think any decent supervisors will get any postgraduate students to work with him. So, and this is the lesson that I would really want all of us, including myself, to meditate on it and see. And how about the funding and the funding agency? Will they ever forgive us 6 years to come up with a small fragment of data, small fragment of DNA, and use a lot of money to maintain the chimpanzee? Not many tools are available. And if you write the report, we put the report there, unknown agents. So those were the things gone. I mean, gone were those days where the techniques are now available. We have widely used PCR, RT-PCR, qPCR. Now we even have digital droplet PCR, which is much 1,000 times more sensitive than the RT-PCR or qPCR. So we have the next generation sequencing, which is already the 3rd generation that can take a single molecule long read. Okay, a 10 kilobases hepatitis C virus is actually, it's just a matter of few hours that can be done. And with the advancement of NGS, you can actually reconstruct the virus genome from the blood directly through a technique called metagenome. And you can actually have what we call reconstructions of the virus genomes, a technique that is common in the virome, to reconstruct and get the complete virus genomes, perhaps in less than days, rather than 6 years just to get a fragment of that. So what have we learned? Okay, WHO is optimistic to eradicate the hepatitis C virus by 2030, but to do this, a vaccine is needed. But we know that based on the genotypes of the hepatitis C virus, thanks to the RNA polymerase in this particular hepatitis C virus, which does not have a proofreading activity. In other words, when they replicate the RNA in the liver cells of the human being, they do not check the accuracy of the RNA genome. So along the way, they replicate very fast in less than, their half-life is actually about 6 hours. So that also translates into a high mutations in these viruses. So therefore, vaccine will not be very effective even though the vaccine is available, assuming. And the development of vaccine for hepatitis C virus after so many years is very slow, okay? Now that is because of the poor investment and also the nature of the virus, which I have just explained, because of the RNA polymerases. So, and HCV is now, we know that it is 10 times more diverse than the human immunodeficiency virus, or the one that causes AIDS, and they're much more diverse than the SARS coronavirus too, which is causing pandemic COVID-19 now. So this is something that we have forgotten and we have not worried. Honestly, how many of us are still worried about the HCV? I think we are more paranoid about the COVID-19. But yes, HCV, we have discovered it for so long, we have no vaccine, whereas COVID-19 vaccines are there. That's the jokes. I mean, I find human is a very interesting living organisms. We do have the vaccine and we are worried about the vaccine. Hepatitis C virus, we do not have an effective vaccine, and it is more serious than the SARS-CoV-2 virus, and yet we are not worried about this, okay? So worried what you need to. So this is something that lesson learned and unlearned. Now, again, I stress that WHO estimate that 71 million around the world are still infected with the HCV. Despite the tremendous contributions from the 3 Nobel laureates, the world are still heavily laden by the hepatitis C virus. And this is the image that I think all of you are familiar with. I think last week or last 2 weeks, NASA sends this robot to the Mars, and that whole image of that. So this is how advanced the human being science and technologies are. And we are actually thinking of colonizing other planets. But back to Earth, we are still heavily laden by the hepatitis C virus alone. Let's don't talk about HIV and the rest of the viruses and bacteria and even parasite that is infecting human. Okay. So, and I quote this from Abraham Lincoln: lessons not learned in the blood are soon forgotten. My message is that there's still much more to do in terms of basic research about these infectious agents. And let me just stretch beyond hepatitis C virus. So there are still much more that we need to do, and that may take a long years with unknown agents, something unknown, no assurance of the positive results. The techniques that is available to you may be limiting, but that shouldn't be what we call a roadblocks for your research. And I think that is something that we should learn together this morning. Okay. Now, so with this, I thank the organizer for inviting me to give this talk and to share with you something behind the discovery of the Nobel laureates in the year 2020. Thank you very much. Back to you, Prof. Young.
Thank you, Dr. Chan, for a very informative and insightful presentation on the research journey and outcome of hepatitis C virus. We will now move to this Q&A session. Just to remind you, Professor Dr. Ramesh had spoken about supercapillary, and Professor Chan not as easy as ABC, maybe D, E, and F. So we will now move to the Q&A session. The question, first question. Okay, the first question is from Miss Sophia Low. Wherever she comes from, not quite sure. Question is, this is for Professor Ramesh. How to resolve the problem of high-cost ionic liquid for commercial applications with relatively low performance compared to other commonly used counterparts, for example, solvents, and how about the recyclability? Prof. Ramesh.
Thank you, Prof. Yong. So I think here got 2 questions. So let me explain what I call the first part. To prepare the what I call like a polymer electrolytes, like conventionally, we always use organic solvent. The purpose of people are using organic solvent is to dissolve the polymer and also the salt or other additives that incorporated in the system. So the main function of the solvents are to dissolve the materials. When we use what I call like iron liquid, so we don't need to use the extra solvent because the iron liquid not only can behave as a ionic carrier, at the same time they also can behave as a solvent. So when we use iron liquid, we can avoid using a solvent. But when we use solvent, the problem will be we still have to use the ionic carrier. The reason we're trying to avoid the solvent because the solvent can easily volatile and also it's environmentally unfriendly. And Ms. Sophia got a very good point that she mentioned that the cost of iron liquid actually very expensive. Okay, the one we cannot deny that. So what we have done in our lab is we get the cheap raw material and we synthesize our own what I call like iron liquid. And recently we have completed one PhD thesis where we compared the results of commercially available iron liquid and the synthesized iron liquid. And we found our synthesized iron liquid shows comparable results and in some cases even better than the commercially available. And the cost of the synthesized iron liquid is much cheaper compared to the commercially available iron liquid. So my advice is for the researchers who are working on this, it's better either you develop in your lab or you collaborate with the labs where they synthesize their own iron liquid so that it can be used in our studies. So it also create a good collaboration. So that is my advice for that part. Second, how about the recyclability? So recyclability is actually got many methods. So one of the widely used method to recycle iron liquid and well-known method is the molecular distillations. For this molecular distillation, before we do that, we have to study few things. So for example, the factors that we need to take into considerations are feed flow rate, distillation temperature, and also the distillation pressure. Beside this, there are also other proposed methods to recycle iron liquid. For example, like phase separation, which include the extraction and also the crystallization, and also on the adsorption and membrane and distillation of ion pairs. And the last one is also, I read somewhere, they also mentioned about the dissociation of the iron liquid. We dissociate the iron liquid and they become as a volatile neutral species. Once they become the volatile neutral species, they might not be more harmful for the environment and also for us. So I hope I answer the question. If you still not clear, if you want to have more, you can always contact me by my email. Thank you, Fabio.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Ramesh, for the answer. I hope Sophia is happy with the answer. The second question. The second question is also for Professor Ramesh. The question is from Mr. Fahan Hakwin, postgraduate student from University Technology Petronas. His question or his comment: first, I am interested with the hydrogel electrolyte. May I know how do you apply the gel in 3-cell system in detail? Prof. Ramesh.
Okay, since it asked in detail, so I try to explain to you about the hydrogel first of all. So hydrogel, initially they are not like a, what I call like a conductor. So to prepare the hydrogel, there are two methods there. So one is the physical hydrogel and the other one is a chemical hydrogel. So like a physical hydrogel normally based on the ionic cross-linking. So this we can done by normal mixing itself. When we talk about the chemical hydrogels, so this involve the new covalent bond formation and cross-linking agent. So how to make the hydrogel to become as the hydrogel electrolyte, because hydrogel generally used in the biological applications. So the main thing for us to produce the hydrogel to become as a hydrogel electrolyte is the incorporation of the charge carriers. And to prepare the hydrogel electrolytes, we need the host polymer and we need the appropriate initiator, for example, like ammonium persulfate. And we also need to incorporate a cross-linking agent, which in many cases we use like a clay. In our lab, we use like a sodium montmorillonate. And to make the hydrogel to become as a hydrogel electrolyte, we use like a lithium salt or even magnesium salt or aluminum salt, and even like ammonium salt also can be used. So once they become like a hydrogel electrolyte, then only we characterized. And when we talk about these things, the host polymer that we're going to be used as a hydrogel is also play an important role. Yeah, for example, polyvinyl alcohol. Why we can use a polyvinyl alcohol to become as a hydrogel electrolyte? So to interact with the ions, for example, like a lithium ion battery or lithium ion supercapacitor, the lithium ion need to be interact with the hydrogel. So polyvinyl alcohol can be used as hydrogel because polyvinyl alcohol contain the alcohol functional group where there is an oxygen atom is there. So this oxygen can interact with the lithium ion. So that is why the polyvinyl alcohol can be used as a hydrogel. And for this polyvinyl alcohol, we can use as a physical cross-linking or chemical cross-linking. And when we talk about the 3-cell system and the 2-cell system, 3-cell system or 3 electrode cell normally used to fabricate electrode and to characterize them. So once we prepare the electrode material, earlier in my slides, I mentioned about the all-in-one configuration where we prepare the electrolyte and also the electrode by using hydrogel. So the questions mentioning more about the 3-cell system. So this 3-cell system is focusing on the electrode materials. So the hydrogel electrode normally become like a gel. We can't use that hydrogel as a 100% as a electrode materials. So this hydrogel electrode will behave as a active materials. So this will comprise generally about like a 75% of the component of the electrode. Into that hydrogel electrode which behave as active material, we add like a acetylene black and like a NMP as a solvent, and this will make like a slurry. So this slurry will be used as a working electrode. Then we use a reference electrode. Mostly we use like a silver and silver chloride, and we use a platinum wire as a counter electrode. So this will be used to prepare the like a 3-cell system to characterize the electrode. So whereas for the fabrication and the characterization of the supercapacitor or electrochemical devices, we use the 2 electrode system. Like I mentioned earlier, if we use all-in-one configuration, then it will be an excellent breakthrough where the electrolyte will be sandwiched with the electrode because of the sticky properties and also high adhesive properties. It becomes like a 1-cell system, and the characterization and the performance of the devices also can be enhanced. So again, thank you, Prof. Yong.
Okay. Right, we move on to question number 3, also for Professor Ramesh. The question is from Tan Yao Heng, undergraduate from UCSI University. Question is, what is the lifespan for supercapacitor and how many times it can be recharged? How reliable it is? Prof. Ramesh.
Okay, regarding the lifespan of a supercapacitor, so normally in in academia, so our main core will be like publication and so on. So for these purposes, we have charge and discharge, and they can retain the high efficiency up to like 90% and above. We have a charge and discharge commonly for all the devices that we fabricate. We have tried like more than 3,000 times. Some even can withstand about more than 10,000 times. It's possible. And they also can give like a high coulombic efficiency. it shows they can retain the properties of the prolonged time. Okay, how reliable it is? Like I mentioned earlier, we not only talking about the supercapillary, because remember, supercapillary, it's a symmetrical device or hybrid device, which is a combination of batteries and supercapacitors. So the reliability of the device basically depends on the main component, which here we are talking about the electrode and electrolytes. So if we are using the electrolyte, in our cases, like I mentioned to you all earlier, we are not using like a liquid electrolyte because liquid electrolytes are very dangerous because of the leakage. Even now, lithium ion batteries are banned from traveling to overseas, even like a flight, they won't allow us to bring the lithium ion batteries. So how reliable? So if we come from the liquid electrolytes to use as a polymer electrolytes and make the whole system in the solid state, they are very reliable. So the challenge in this field is when we make all in the solid state. So solid state supercapillary, solid state battery, or solid state supercapacitor, the challenge will be how nicely they are sandwiched, how nicely they are contacted, how adhesive are they. So the reliability again comes, the safety and the performance. So by using polymer, electrolyte, and also the electrode materials, like even I proposed like a hydrogel earlier, so they become everything in the solid state and they are highly reliable because the safety issues can be taken care because of the solid state of the devices. Thank you, Prof. Yong.
Right. Question 4, also for Professor Ramesh from Mr. Logan Raj. What is the criteria for selecting a polymer to be a polymer electrolyte?
Okay, for this question, what I can give you all is I can give you like a simple example. So for example, just say if a question asks between polyethylene and polymethyl methacrylate, which one can be used as a host polymer to be used in electrochemical devices? So if you look at the polyethylene, polyethylene is comprises only carbon and hydrogen. When we look at the polymethyl methacrylate, beside carbon and hydrogen, they got ester functional group. So one of the main component in the ester functional group is a oxygen atom. And generally we know polymers are insulator and polymer electrolytes are conductor. So for the insulator to become as a conductor, there must be a ion. So even like Prof. Yong when explained, the Nobel Prize was given to the lithium ion battery. So what they're trying to say is the main conductor in that batteries are lithium ion. For lithium ion to be a conductor and for the lithium ion to do the hopping mechanism based on the Arrhenius theory, they must have some kind of a electronegative element in the polymer backbone. So for us to select a polymer to be used as a polymer electrolyte, there must be a electronegative element. So in the polymethyl methacrylate, there is oxygen due to the ester functional group. And other example, for example, polyvinyl chloride. Polyvinyl chloride can be used because they got the chloride atom there. And polyethylene oxide, the first polymer which used as a polymer electrolyte. Why polyethylene oxide can be used? Because of the oxygen atoms there again. And even like a polyvinylidene fluoride can be also used. Why? Because they got the fluorine. But polyvinylidene fluoride generally not much preferred compared to the polyvinyl chloride because fluorine, as we know, one of the most reactive electronegative element in the world. So the reactivity can be very big. So the safety issue can be a problem there. So that is why when we compare to the fluorine, people always prefer the chlorine. And even like a bromine, polyvinylidene bromide also can be used. But bromine, comparatively, the reaction is lesser. So we must identify the electronegative element based polymer. At the same time, we also must study the reactivity based on the periodic table and other reaction mechanism of the system. Thank you, Prof. Yong.
Because of time constraint, we will have the last question for Professor Ramesh. Question is from Ms. Suraya Ibrahim. How will be the performance of devices by using hydrogels?
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Okay, when we talk about the performance of the devices, like I mentioned in my presentation, nowadays, even like lithium-ion batteries, people are focusing on the liquid electrolytes. The reason they're using liquid electrolytes, the liquid electrolytes generally will be used as the separator will be dipped in the liquid electrolytes. The reason they're using the liquid electrolytes because the liquid electrolytes will give a very good contact, then the conduction mechanism will be excellent in the devices. But again, we need to replace the liquid electrolytes because liquid electrolytes got the leakage problem and also the explosions. But when we replace the liquid electrolytes with the, we know polymers are generally rigid. So even though they can improve the conductivity, but the sandwiching problem will be a big issue. Because of that, the contact will be a problem. So why we are proposing hydrogel? Because there are many studies to say gel polymer electrolytes can improve the conductivity better than the solid polymer electrolytes. So since the hydrogel, initially one of my students working in the hydrogel, but for the drug delivery applications. But when we saw that this one can also be used for the electrochemical devices, so we tried that in the electrochemical devices. And ironically, we found it was a very good performance. So the main purpose why hydrogel can enhance the performance of devices because of the high adhesive properties of the hydrogel in electrochemical devices. Thank you, Professor.
Right, thank you, Professor Ramesh, for answering the questions, and thank you for the audience who asked the questions. We will now move to the questions for Professor Chan Kok Kan. First question from Dr. Tan Sui Lian, my good friend from the Academy of Sciences, Malaysia. Two questions in fact. Part one, how prevalent is hepatitis C virus compared to HIV and HBV in Malaysia? And second part, do you think a vaccine against HCV, if developed, will need to be renewed yearly, like the flu vaccine? Prof. Chan.
Thank you, Prof. Young, and thank you, Dr. Tan, for the questions. I do not have the statistics in hand for Malaysia, but globally, HCV is actually very dominant, even as dominant or if not more than the hepatitis B virus. So, and that is actually the worrying case because with the vaccine successfully developed for hepatitis B virus, so the incidence to get this hepatitis B virus infections has dropped, okay? And because of the nature of mode of transmission for hepatitis A virus, so those are actually only dominant in area where the sanitation is actually very bad. So otherwise, HCV is still actually the prevalent case for these incidents. Now, B, for your question B, vaccine, if you ask my opinion, because of the genome heterogeneity of this particular hepatitis C virus, and they have so many genotypes, subtypes, and also quasi-species, and we actually noticed that reinfections are actually possible. Allow me to draw an analogy that people are actually worrying about the SARS-CoV-2 virus, where will vaccine being effective against the mutations or mutants. So we see this in the hepatitis C virus, that seems to be the case that the developed vaccine is not very useful for the what we call reinfections. But again, as I said, the basic research is important as long as you get the conserved amino acid sequences, which is, we call it the epitope, and that could be actually used to develop a good vaccine, or we call it a universal vaccine against all types of HCV. And preliminary works has been done and again tested on the poor chimpanzees, and that seems to be positive. So one vaccine fits all, and that we are optimistic on this. And whether we need to renew this yearly, that again very much depends on the emergence of the mutants, and also on the exact locations where the amino acid has been mutated. If it is a vaccine candidate that has been mutated, then yes, it will be like the flu vaccine. But otherwise, then again, the what we call one universal vaccines could be possible. Okay, but it will be tricky to do so. I have to say this. Thank you, Prof. Young. Thank you, Dr. Tan, for the questions.
The second question for Dr. Chan is from Miss Siu Moi. I do not know whether it's Professor Pang Siu Moi. If it is so, it's from UCSI and UM. Question is, any possibility of other unknown hepatitis virus? Dr. Chan.
Thank you, Prof. Young. Thanks, Ms. Siu Moi, for the questions. Up to now, based on the global scale, as I presented in one of my slides, there is what we call unknown sequences, but it is actually not unknown hepatitis virus. It's just that the sequence is so novel that in the hypervariable region of the genome of the hepatitis C virus, it does not resemble any hepatitis C virus, but it doesn't make it a new hepatitis virus. So if you're talking about this unknown hepatitis C virus, yes, we do have some what we call new sequence type. But whether you're talking, let's say, about a new, completely new genus, then as a scientist, I am skeptical on this. And well, I have a degree in law. In criminal law, my lecturer always told me before the crime is solved, everyone could be suspect. So I will not hesitate to say this, that could be unknown hepatitis unknown hepatitis virus, which they may be, in the animal, in the wildlife, and that has not been transmitted into the human. We do not know, just like the coronavirus that happens in the last 2 years in Wuhan. And but globally, we have not seen a new hepatitis that happens in the human body. So at the moment, we are still considered lucky for that case. Thank you, Prof. Yong. Thanks, Ms. Siu Moi, for the questions.
Question 3, again for Dr. Chan from Ms. Susan. Any possibility that the vaccine for HCV be developed in the near future? Chan.
Thanks, Prof. Yong, for the questions. Yes, the likelihood is there. Just that we have to deal with the heterogeneity of the genome of this very versatile hepatitis C virus. As long as we are able to find what we call a universal epitopes that can go against the different serotypes or different what we call genotypes and subtypes and quasi-species, then yes, this will be possible. And also don't forget, we are now living with a lot of new technologies with the advancements of NGS, monitoring, surveillance could be possible on almost on real-time basis. So with this input from different technologies, that could be done. Yes.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Chan, for answering the questions, and thank you to the audience and the participants for posing the questions. We have now come to the end of the session, and in closing, I would like to take the opportunity to thank all the participants for their active participation. I hope the session has been useful and meaningful to the participants. And last but not least, we would like to thank the speakers for taking their valuable time off to share with us their knowledge and telling us the challenges and opportunities in both the fields of lithium-ion batteries and hepatitis C virus. But before we close, a small announcement. This is with regards to the webinar on design thinking, which will be held on 25th March 2021, again organized by Minds, and the speaker will be Dr. Edwin Chung from Taylor's University. The participation fee is very low. For the student, 20 ringgit, and for adult, 50 ringgit. And of course, it is open, complimentary to all Minds members. So please take note and register for this webinar. And before we end, we close, there is a slide screen show on the poster regarding this design thinking webinar.